Summertime for most people in most markets in the US, of course, is our high season. So right now we are seeing much further extended booking lead times. People are booking up for the summer, schools are letting out. We're seeing much higher ADRs since demand is going up very high. And we're also seeing longer lengths of stay, which is also really nice. And I know we're going to go over a lot of this today, but planning in advance for this time period is how you can really maximize your summer season.
People in Scotland will book very much well ahead of the game for summer holidays. And a lot of people who will just come knowing that, well, it could be bad, doesn't matter, we still want to go, we want the area and everything that it offers. But what I would say is, I think a lot of it is to do with how proactive you can be to keep your guests up to date with what might be happening. So for me, communication is key here. So there's lots of things, there's wee things you can put in properties just to try and help guests should there suddenly be bad weather.
Welcome to RevLabs by PriceLabs.
Hello, welcome to this new online event, webinar, masterclass, whatever you call it. Just giving you value as usual. We're going to be started for real in a few seconds. I hope you do see me. I mean, not losing much if you do not, but we're going to be talking, as you know, about pricing right for the high season. Summer in Europe, summer in the US. I'm chatting just for 1 minute to give time to people for streaming in. But while we do that, so I'm Thibault. I will introduce myself formally, and I have three speakers in a minute. But do let me know. Do let me know where you are at the moment, right? Where you're based, how many properties do you manage? That will give us, would give me and give all the speakers an idea where you are and what you do. So feel free. Brooklyn, New York, hello. Chania, 25 properties, hello. St. Louis Obispo, Kate, hello. Great scarf. Thank you. Thank you, Monique. Look at that. Orlando, 125. Paris, France, bonjour. So many people are streaming, so many. I'm trying to keep up. Look at that. Colombia. So Germany, 250 with Carla. 375 in the Rocky Mountains with Alyssa. Let me try to go back up. France again, Vaucluse. Reno, Nevada, 45. 100 in Mexico. Hello, Eduardo. San Diego, 65. Vienna, 150 properties. All right, 1,000 properties. I like around 1,000 properties in Austria. Fantastic, Elias.
Hey, Fabio.
And Fabio's here in the room, I'm guessing.
Yeah, Fabio is one of our customers.
Exactly, and speaker. Good to see you too. All right, so there's 70 of you. Let me start. So as usual, there's like 4 slides and we go straight into the discussion, but I do have to show a few slides, if only to give you some context and about what we'll be sharing today. So let me just do that. Boom, boom, boom. All right. As I said, we'll be talking about summer season. So obviously it's May. Normally you should already have worked on your summer strategy. Here we're more like, it's not last minute, but things to check, what to be sure of, because it's high season. You want to make sure, for example, you know about your local events, you've detected them. And we'll also be talking something interesting, like what to do if during the high season, that's going to be a bad weekend weather-wise. So anyway, let's try to talk about this. As I said, so I'm Thibault. I'm the head of product marketing here at PriceLabs. I'm also the founder of the short-term rental news website, Rental Scale Up by PriceLabs. So it's a news website. We have a free newsletter and we have a podcast. Actually, here, what we're doing today is going to be shared in a podcast. That's the one from Rental Scale Up, and it will also be shared by the one by PriceLabs. I guess a few attending the event today of you know what PriceLabs is. I'm not sure you've heard that one, but now we're pricing more than 500,000 listings in the world every day. right? So every day there's 500 listings in the world that are priced through PriceLabs through the pricing algorithm. So thank you all for your loyalty, and I'm great to see this number growing and around the world, which is important to us. So thank you so much for all this. That was the part where I was plugging the podcast, the companies. Look at that. It was short and sweet. Last but one slide. So what we're going to be talking about today, as I said, we'll be talking with our speakers in a minute. What are they seeing in their market? So usually this is some kind of doom and gloom in news sometimes. So like, what are people really seeing from the ground? And you'll hear it from these very people. We'll talk about, as I said, about local planning, local events, sorry. How much do you need to plan for them? How do you find all the local events that could be affecting your bookings this summer? And then we'll be talking as well about bad weather, what to do, what to anticipate. And for that, and I will start slowing down because this is where it becomes very interesting. We have three speakers. So quickly, I'm just going to go through their names and then leave them way more room in this order to introduce themselves. So we have Brian Hatcher from Hatch Capital, Jane Mack from Your AirHost, and Kyle Driskell from PriceLabs. But let's go to them straight. And Brian, Jane, and then Kyle, please introduce yourselves.
Thank you, Thibault. Hi, everyone. My name is Brian Hatcher. I am an owner operator located here in Atlanta, Georgia. I run Hatch Capital, which is an investment company which comprises of a number of short-term rental brands, both on the arbitrage, ownership, and now development side. We're working on building some experiential hospitality resorts as well as scaling the management side of things. Excited to be here today and talk about everything that we're seeing from pricing to optimizations and bookings.
Thank you, Brian.
Hi everyone, I'm Jane Mack and I'm the Senior Account Manager for Your AirHost, which is a property management company based in London. My role with Your AirHost is to be the main contact for our property owners, but that means I deal with basically every department in the business. So I help them with their pricing, with their understanding the revenue and where it comes from, and looking at their availability and their dates, right through to their maintenance and their cleaning and everything that goes in with managing a property. My journey in short-term rentals started back in 2010, where I actually owned my own property management business with my husband up in Scotland. So a very different market to London properties. So after 10 years, we sold that to a large national company. And then I spent the last several years going out in consulting, helping property managers to grow their business and hosts as well. I've got a podcast called Grow Your Holiday Let Business. And I used to do lots of speaking at different events and sharing experience and knowledge with property managers. So I'm really looking forward to doing this today to share, a different topic with everyone, and especially bad weather, because having managed properties in Scotland, it's something I am very familiar with. So I look forward to sharing all this with you.
Thank you, Jane. Kyle.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. I'm Kyle Driskell. I'm a senior solutions consultant with PriceLabs, former revenue manager. But I'm happy to be here with you guys. Looking forward to learning from Jane and Brian. Work with Brian a little bit, and obviously get to spend a lot of time with Thibault. I am one of the hosts of the RevLabs podcast, along with a couple of my teammates. And then I'm also one of the faces that you'll see if you ever watch our Masterclass series on YouTube as well.
Fantastic. Thank you, Kyle. And before I go into the first question, housekeeping, this is being recorded. If you registered, you'll get the recording by email and obviously on the two podcast platform. On any podcast platform, sorry, but in the RevLabs podcast by PriceLabs and also in the Rental Scale Up podcast. So just feel free, focus on the conversation. And if you want to chime in, have a question, we have a Q&A section. Feel free to ask your question there. We'll respond to your questions, maybe along the session or maybe at the end if we do have time. All right. So as I said, what are you guys seeing in your markets, right? So it's the first question, and maybe to get started, if you need to let us know about where your properties, what kind of properties you have, so people can really understand what you're seeing for summer 2025. Sorry, Brian, do you want to get started?
Yeah, absolutely. This upcoming summer, and just for reference, I'm located in Atlanta, Georgia, and all of the properties that we kind of own and manage are in the Southeast. And so summertime for most people in most markets in the US, of course, is our high season. So right now we are seeing much further extended booking lead times. People are booking up for the summer, schools are letting out. We're seeing much higher ADRs since demand is going up very high. And we're also seeing longer lengths of stay, which is also really nice. And I know we're going to go over a lot of this today, but planning in advance for this time period is how you can really maximize your summer season because with the extreme kind of demand that starts to come in, as well as those longer booking lead times, the more that you plan and the further in advance that you plan, you can really reap the benefits of that. So we're seeing a lot of really good booking trends, strong booking trends for this summer, stronger than I would say we even saw last year, which is encouraging. And yeah, looking forward to kind of going through this summer season and seeing how we can perform in relation to the year before.
If I could ask for a question, so that's what you see and how you see it. Do you look at specific tools, for example? Where do you get your information from on when you want to take the pulse of your business?
Yeah. Of course, PriceLabs was one of the tools that we use, looking at our market dashboards, understanding how we're pacing from our prior years. We also leverage Key Data, which is another really good provider. They link to your property management system, and they also partner and link with other owners. It's really like a prerequisite. You have to provide your data to them to use it. So they have really good comp sets and data that is related to the exact calendar of an owner down to owner blocks and those kinds of things. So the level of granularity that we can get out of there helps us understand what kind of trends that we're seeing, both from a booking lead time, blocks, those kinds of things. We also leverage Rank Breeze, which is another really good tool to help you understand where you're showing up in the market. I think around higher season time, your rankings can shift, especially if you haven't adjusted your property accordingly. So making sure that we have a good pulse on how high our properties are ranking. It's always our goal to be on the first page to get maximum visibility, to give us more opportunities to be booked. But those are kind of the primary tools that we're using to understand both lead time, pacing, and as well as ranking and views.
Very complete. Thanks a lot. How about you, Jane?
Yeah, so we, as I said, we're based in London, so our properties are just London, not London based. So we actually have a wide range of guests that come from the holiday makers and the families, but also we've still got a lot of people who are just people traveling through. They're using it as a base, perhaps for work, or people are relocating. So we do get a wide variety of guests that come through. And some of those guests obviously are coming all year round, not just the holiday makers. We're getting like relocations and workers all the time. Looking at our occupancy at the moment, we are for like June and July, we're pacing very much the same on last year. August is starting to look slightly higher than last year, which is good. Our lengths of stays, of course, a lot of the times tend to be around 7 to 14 days. But also 3 to 4 days is a really, really popular for London. Once again, we get a lot of people just passing through and a lot of stop-offs and stop-gaps because it's the market that we're in. Booking window, usually in the lower seasons, we are sort of the 2 to 6 days. But of course, we're starting to get like more of the June, July bookings in now. So of course, booking window is it's getting longer now because we're coming into that higher season. So yeah, I mean, but I say they'll always get, because of the market we have and the wide range, I guess, we'll always have those 2 to 6 days as quite a high rate for people who are booking sort of in advance, just because of the market it is. So, I'm used to seeing that in Scotland. It's a very holiday market. It's just, they focus a lot on school holidays. So it's a very different length of stay, very different booking window. But I think with London, it is different just because we have such a different range of guests that come to the city. We also use PriceLabs and AirDNA as well for getting our data. Obviously with PriceLabs, that's our main tool, which is looked at 2 and 3 times a week, constantly being looked at just to see, are there any gaps? What properties have got gaps? Can we reduce it slightly? Can we encourage the booking? What can we do with the prices? So we do use that absolutely all the time. It's on an ongoing basis. It's not a case of set it up and let it run. We do pay attention to it, and it is used an awful lot just to really, really try and keep that occupancy going and offer guests as best we can, the best prices, obviously in line with what's out there in the market.
Thank you, Jane. Kyle, I guess you have a more like whole US market view, don't you?
Yeah, one of the things that I'm really lucky to do in working with the customers that I work with, like I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee, so I live in the Southeast. I live it. I know exactly what Brian's experiencing in Atlanta, but I get to work with a lot of customers that are, on the West Coast, some down in Texas, some northeastern ones. And you get a really good grasp of kind of what's happening in the States, working with so many different customers. Um, Overall, if I were to say just in a general way, summer looks incredible. Assume and keep in mind, I'm speaking specifically to the United States with this. It looks incredible, especially if you've been taking care of your property, paying attention to all the little details that matter. If you have a property that should be performing high, generally speaking, it is performing really high right now. There's a couple of nuances mixed in there. One of them that I'd like to call out just because I saw a couple of people say they were in Orlando or in Kissimmee. Um, there's a big pattern happening with international travelers coming in and coming into markets like New York City and Orlando and Los Angeles and maybe even Boston to an extent. This could be something that's impacting our gentleman that said he was having some issues getting booked up. But we're seeing a lot less international travel come in. Drive to markets are performing great, but specifically in that Orlando Kissimmee area, right after the 4th of July, there is a massive depression in bookings coming in. So that weekend post 4th of July is down about 25% versus last year. Those are some of the things that we're picking up in these larger markets that have a lot of international travel. It's not that the market's down. There are some weeks that you're going to have to be ahead of. But generally speaking, U.S. market looks really, really good for summer. When we talked a few days ago, one of the things that I think could be really playing into this, like Brian's talking about, we're all super excited about our kids getting out of school and having that summer trip or whatever. I have a feeling that we may be seeing people that were taking 2 or 3 trips in a year, potentially narrowing it down to taking one trip this year. And I think that's one thing that we could be seeing a big mover with the summer traffic. So just something to mention that I've kind of picked up on.
Thanks for sharing that. It's at the same time, like I heard from three of you some kind of positive news, some maybe some worrying news, and some fact that basically it's good to know what's going on. So let's talk about this. So let's imagine I'm listening to this show right now. And I'm like, okay, I just want to make sure I'm ready or my team is ready, that we've done everything that's needed and we know what's happening this summer. We know about the early trends. But it's probably if I have a large portfolio of listings, there's a lot to do. So if you were that person, right, what would you tell him? Would you tell her about how to prioritize, if I feel maybe underprepared, what should I prioritize, what to do first? Jane, you want to start this one?
Yeah, sure. Um, for me, I would always say prioritize your pricing and your availability because one of the things we'll notice, and certainly I can only talk from the UK market, is different locations will also have different booking patterns and holiday patterns. So they'll have different ways like availability. So for example, I know in London here, we need to have availability all year round and flexibility for it. So we need to be offering from the minimum 2 night stays. We need to offer that all year round. But I know from other areas in the UK, some places won't offer that, but they're much more sort of holiday season focused, peak season focused for like minimum of 7 nights. So it's about knowing your area first to know what is it your guests are looking for in terms of availability. So you're offering that. Don't offer minimum of 7 nights if everyone comes for short breaks and vice versa. If people want 7 nights, offer them that and price correctly at it. So it's really knowing your location and your area so you know what people are wanting. And then also it's just having that pricing ready. Sometimes we don't look ahead enough to the season ahead, but look at actually where are you in the market? Are you actually using any, what are you using? Are you using some tools to get ready for your pricing? Or are you actually maybe just got a small number of properties and you can actually manually go out and have a look? Even if you have to do that, do pay attention to your other properties in the area, see what they're pricing at, what are they looking at, like what's it looking at, and use that as your data. is I think data is the one thing that can actually give you that accurate information as opposed to trying to pluck figures out of thin air. Actually use what's out there. So I think for me, it's always like get that pricing and availability right. You know, if you need to be really flexible, if you don't, see what your market needs, what are your guests looking for, and start with that. And then the rest of it, you can build in everything, you know, as you go on with that.
Sounds like a great place to start. Brian, what would you say? What would you answer to that same question?
Yeah, I would echo a lot of what Jane has mentioned. Great information. I think planning first starts with data. My background is in data, and so I always try to look at things from a data perspective in terms of how can we answer this with the best quality information available. And I think even using PriceLabs, starting there, you can curate and create a really good comp set locally down to what types of properties are your competition and what's going on with them in your area, because I think even down to almost zip code to zip code, things can change. And so understanding for the seasons coming up, what does your competitor calendars look like? What are properties that are performing very well in your area? What do they look like? Are their bookings up? Are they down? Are their ADRs higher than last year or not? And I think using that data to first kind of create benchmarks for your plan to see, are we even on track, or do we need to adjust our plan to try to maximize what's coming for summer, is where I want to start. I think then moving into, after pricing, kind of availability, as since we all know that summer has much higher demand, it's more likely that people are also staying longer. If you typically have minimum nightly stays of 2 or even 3 on weekends, I think you can get away with upping that to 3, maybe even 4 nights sometimes. While you might be attracting a smaller group of people, there still is a much larger overall group of people looking to stay at those time frames. And so when you can capture more nights and get higher occupancy, well, along with higher rates, I think that that can be a really good move for you. I think even when it comes to listing content, understanding that it's summertime, moving and shifting some of your summer, pro-summer amenities and things like that to the front of your listing. One of the things that we do, we have a pool at some properties, and so we move those to the very front of the listing photos during the summer. But of course, we don't want to do that during the winter time because that's not that big of an upsell. So I think adjusting your listing content can be something that really helps you plan. And then even within your guest messaging and how you're getting relevant information, understanding what's going on in your market. One of the things that we do on the front end of each booking is we ask each guest what the reason for their stay is, and that's for data collection. Because the more that you understand why your people are coming to your area, the more you'll learn about those small nuanced events that might not be broadcasted online or on Facebook. And you can then really start to become a big fish in a small pond, and you can reach out to those specific events or even find more people who are going to those events and serve those people with your properties or even other property managers in your area. So those are, I think, some key actions you can do to really optimize your summer bookings.
And Brian, just may I ask you a question about, you talk about minimum nights. Um, there's Emerson in the Q&A section asking, whether, for example, he should go to a 3-night minimum for weekends. I guess it's hard to answer not knowing the market, but how would you know that it's a good time? Yes, I can go for certain minimum stay nights. How do you know that?
Yeah, so there's a number of different tools. Of course, you can use PriceLabs to start trying to track what the typical minimum nightly stay is. There's other tools that you can also leverage, like we kind of talked about key data. But I think even looking at your own historical data is really helpful. Look at your prior years. Look at typically when people come and stay on the weekends. Are they actually staying longer than 2 nights, just that Friday, Saturday? Sometimes are people staying Sunday, or are they coming in Thursday? And then also understanding kind of what I just mentioned about why they're coming to stay. I think one of the things that you can try if you're not sure and you kind of want to dip your toe in is beyond 30 or even 60 days out, have the minimum weekend set to 3 nights. And if you're seeing that you're still getting consistent bookings at those 3 night minimums, then you can kind of keep scooting it up, maybe to even 2 weeks or even full time, have a 3 night minimum on weekends. That's kind of how we started. And then as we see demand picking up, we just shorten that window to try to capitalize on as many nights as possible.
Thanks. Thank you. Kyle, how about you? Again, if you feel underprepared or you want to know where to start, when to prioritize things, what would you look at first?
I want to echo what Jane and Brian said. They knocked it out of the park with their answer. Like that's exactly what you need to do. Make sure you are paying attention to what the market is dictating and trying to match what the market's wanting. So the one thing I would say specifically towards PriceLabs, the neighborhood data area within PriceLabs is super, super, super useful for you. And it's one of the most underutilized, I don't want to call it a feature, one of the most underutilized spaces. I'm going to do a little plug for our masterclass next week. We will be talking about the neighborhood data tab at the masterclass. So if you'd like to join us, come join us. It's a 5-day little boot camp we're doing. But that neighborhood data has so much interesting information for you that really is impactful. On the pricing charts, you have the 50th percent, the median booking price. If there are more than 5 bookings on a particular date, you can see what that average booking price is. You have the comp set area down there where you can go and, like Brian was talking about, build out your comp set. You get to see what their minimum stay is, what their rate calendar looks like, what their cleaning fees are. The one area that I would suggest pointing out when you're looking at how things are moving is look at the occupancy chart though. Pay attention to where the market is pacing versus last year. So it's going to be the red line on your occupancy chart and then the gray solid line. If red's higher than the gray solid, the market's performing well right now. That coupled with the pickup metric, which is where are people actually booking over the past 7 days, that can be very, very useful. So I would say the number one thing you should be doing in PriceLabs in particular is pay attention to that neighborhood data area. If you have questions about it, you can always reach out to our support staff and really dive in there. But there's so much useful information, and it all goes back to what Brian and Jane were talking about, seeing what the market has for minimum stay, seeing how demand looks, understanding where people are kind of looking right now. I think that would be my biggest suggestion. One other thing to just kind of mention, I think, is the importance of the distribution channels. I think as a general rule, people understand Airbnb is going to come in a little bit later. VRBO, Booking.com, they're going to come in a little bit further out, so to speak, specifically in the US market. But it's really important to understand how those interact. And if you have different setups for the channels, making sure that your strategy matches those channels to an extent as well. So making sure your rates are a little bit more bookable, so to speak, further out on Vrbo, whereas you might be able to hold for a little bit higher rate on Airbnb, so to speak.
Thanks, Kyle. I'd like to get back to Jane actually, because Kyle and Brian talked about other things that we can think about when it comes to checking, doing my checklist. Am I prepared, right? We heard content distribution. So you talk about what you want to prioritize first, and next, what should people maybe review or look at?
Yeah, but sort of just to carry on from what Brian said, he talked about obviously your listing content and your guest messaging. There's other operational sort of changes you can make in your business. I think we all know that that peak period for property managers can get crazy, from May to the end of September. And I think being prepared for that as well will really help you. So things like, you're going to get a lot of places back-to-back bookings. That means that's back-to-back, housekeeping and changeovers needing done. That could be extra supplies. So is it getting these people in, get the support in that you need? Because unless you get the support you need, you as a property manager find yourself pulled in many different situations, which means you stop looking at some of the important things, like you stop looking at your pricing or you stop looking at your marketing because you're so busy in the operational side of it. So it's getting that support in that you're going to need. And, it could be even just, in advance, doing some advertising for any support, making sure you have the right maintenance on hand, stock up on lots of supplies. Because one of the things I do see is that with a lot of property managers, and I've done it myself, in the past, is that we forget about what's coming ahead because we get so caught up in the every day-to-day stuff that we're doing. And that means we're pulled in every direction, doing everything, but we're actually forgetting about the really important crux. And that is things like, is my pricing okay? What's my marketing? How am I putting the properties out there? How am I getting the bookings in? Because we just set that up and leave it running. So I'd say get that operational support behind you so you can still be focusing on those really important parts. It's going to take you through the season and into the next season as well.
Thanks for that. I'm going to stay with you for a minute. Oh, is anybody else has anything else to add on what next to look at? We talked about priority. Is there anything else to look at when I'm reviewing to know whether I feel prepared for the summer? Anything to add?
I'll add in there a little bit, and it kind of echoes what Brian was talking about with the photos and making them, set up for seasons and things like that. If you're not converting right now and you feel that your rates are in line with market and you feel that your minimum stays in line with market, make sure you're reflecting on the other things that kind of matter, the photo quality, the listing description. Make sure you're communicating with guests. There's always an opportunity. Revenue management is the numbers, yes, but there's so much other things that go into it. There's always an opportunity for you to look outside of the rate and the minimum lengths of stay and the cancellation policy. There's always opportunity somewhere else. So take a look at your photo quality, take a look at your listing quality if you're not converting as well.
Thanks, Kyle. I'm going to go to another question actually now. We just talked about what to do, what to prioritize. Let's talk about one big mistake not to make, right? Because also sometimes not making a mistake is saving time, so you can really focus on the right thing. I will start with you, Brian. What is the biggest mistake you've done, or maybe you have seen, when it comes to, oh, I want to look at my summer and right now, and people do something wrong and they should not be doing this?
Yeah, I think Jane touched on this earlier, and it's a really good point. Making sure the biggest mistake I see is people not digging into Price Labs and their tools as often as they should. I think a lot of times the pricing tools can be seen as a set it and forget it, an all-knowing tool that's magically going to set everything correctly for me 100% of the time. But you really have to understand what's going on in your market and make manual adjustments and tweaks on a pretty consistent basis, with the understanding of how your market is doing, because the software is just that. It's good software that is only going to be as good as the inputs that you provide it, but you're going to also need to make certain adjustments. And so if you know that a super hyper local event, because you were implementing some questions to ask the guests is going on, that might not be something that's picked up by Price Labs, because the demand spike might not be as high as something like a Taylor Swift concert or an NFL game. Well, if you have that understanding on the front end, you're able to then really capitalize on that. But you need to go in there and manually make those adjustments to capitalize on that additional potential loss of revenue if you didn't know about it. So I think really just not only collecting that data and understanding what's going on in your market, but then using that to make specific adjustments consistently in your pricing software is probably one of the biggest mistakes I see.
Thanks, Brian. How about you, Jane?
Yeah, so I sort of touched on it a bit before about people forgetting what's coming. So I've seen this with a few property managers who I've worked with, where they're not getting their pricing sorted in time for the following seasons. So say, for example, you have, we're like coming into spring 25, and a lot of places in the UK will have, summer 26. People will book ahead for that if they come to the same area every year. But these prices aren't getting sort of uploaded into their systems and used and being put forward because they're too busy doing other things. But yet they're missing out in possible bookings for the people who love to return year after year. And it's just forgetting about those upcoming seasons. And I think as well, what's happened over the years is guests are booking in different ways. So it could have been a guest booked, a couple of years ago, guests were maybe booking, a year or so in advance, or maybe they were booking 6 months in advance. But how people book is changing all the time. So you can't just sit back and go, oh, well, it's okay, because for the last 4 years, we put our prices in for Easter, ready for the next year. Well, actually, people maybe are now booking in January. So it's been just paying attention to the market. And what I find for a lot of property managers is, not taking the time out to maybe just take hold of what's happening out there. And I know, time constraints can be really difficult to sort of follow maybe podcasts or go to events and find all this stuff out. But there's really, really good information out there in this whole industry, which helps you see actually how are guests booking, how are things changing. I need to be following that. Maybe I need to make those changes so I know ahead of the season I've got my prices in, I'm organized and I'm set up. But it's difficult, as I say, and we've seen it, especially since the pandemic. Guest booking patterns have really changed, but they'll always change. Everything's always going to be changing, but staying ahead of that and being able to be organized, get those prices in ahead when your guests are needing them, just so you're not losing out on any really, really good potential bookings there.
Keep up with changes and stay ahead. That's important.
Yeah.
Kyle, how about you? One big mistake you've seen?
I think this is really relevant, and I see it a lot with helping customers, and it's trying to train and trying to get out of the mindset of I need to look at the end of May and the 1st of June, and that's where I'm focusing on right now because it's coming up, and really understanding that right now, if I have a 6 bedroom property in, Pensacola, Florida, I should be looking ahead to like August and September right now because that's kind of where people are booking. Now, if I've got a studio apartment, yes, my eyes should be kind of trained on Memorial Day into the beginning of June and things like that. But being aware of where that kind of average booking window is, where your booking window is, how you've historically booked, like what Brian was mentioning, is super, super important. And then making sure that, you train yourself to look a little bit further. Within PriceLabs, if you go into an individual listing, it pulls you up to the most recent date. That to me is something that if you can understand, like, yes, we want to look there, make sure everything's good, but the most of your attention needs to be focused ahead of time. Going back to what I had mentioned a little bit before about using neighborhood data and the pickup is super important where you see this. Because if you go in and look at a listing, maybe you do it once a week and you just look at that pickup metric, you can see where people are booking in that market. And it kind of helps you understand where you should be training your eyes to. So that to me, I think is the biggest flaw, is not looking at the correct time period that they should. Um, yeah, and obviously we still want to be paying attention to the end of May and the beginning of June, but ultimately for maximum revenue, you want to train your eyes to be looking at the correct time period. For me, we're talking summer right now. Summer strategy to me should be dialed in probably right after spring break in most markets, and then tweaked from there. Just as a general rule of thumb. And I think we've all kind of hinted that from the very beginning of this, that you're so much better off when you go ahead and prepare yourself. So if you've already kind of missed the boat a little bit with some summer bookings, or maybe your Memorial Day's behind this year, take what we talk about today and please make sure you're applying it to your fall strategy, to your winter strategy, and to your next year summer strategies too when that time comes.
Thanks, Guy. And I see a lot of questions. Don't worry, I see the questions coming, so I'll make sure to save time in the end. But I will take one right now for you, Kyle. How Stephanie is asking, how often should you be reviewing your pricing? Weekly, bi-monthly? How to answer that?
Ooh, I think there's a multitude of ways that you could answer this. In a micro level, like actually going in and looking at every single listing and really diving in, you need to do that type of view at least once a month. And if you're crazy busy, as a property manager, you need to be going in there and really looking at each individual listing and understanding how it's working and how things are about once a month. At a macro level, looking at your metrics and going in and having some of the help that PriceLabs will give you, you need to be looking, in my opinion, generally speaking, on a Monday and a Friday at the very minimum. And when I say looking at your metrics, you can change them up a little bit. One of them that I like a lot is the bookings pickup over the past 15 days. As soon as you add that as a metric, now you can look at your entire portfolio very, very differently, because you can go in, just hit that, let's sort it highest to lowest. Now I know these 5 properties haven't been booked in 15 days. So I'm going to spend my Monday looking at those 5 properties. And then maybe on Friday, I'll go in and check those 5 properties and see how I did. Now, on that Monday, Friday thing as well, you want to hop on your multi-calendar and make some adjustments if you have any huge opportunities as well. But generally speaking, big broad view, make sure you're in there and really, really looking at it at least once a month, and then going in and targeting once, twice, multiple times a week if you have the availability for it.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
You started talking about micro trends. I want to talk about local events, which is kind of linked to this, and I'll go to Brian for that. Obviously, tools at PriceLabs. We have list of events. We know December 25th is going to be Christmas every year. That's not complicated. We also have a list of events that we purchase, that we know about, and probably Kyle will cover this. And also, we are able to detect some events as they're happening, right? But I think there's still some value, right, in as a local property manager in collecting events and getting to know local events. So first, how do you know about all the events that could be affecting your markets? How do you know that? And two, what do you do anything special once you know, or do you let the pricing tool drive? What's your strategy?
Yeah, we touched on this a little bit earlier in terms of that guest screening and getting information from them to figure out some of those local events. I think another really good way is you're probably in close proximity to a hotel or convention center, to a sports complex, and even your like local city and county often has events that are more consistent. They typically have a calendar, whether it's online or in person. And I think getting a good list of those, sometimes you might even have to go in person to some of these places, can be really impactful because it can allow you to serve a specific subset of guests that might not be served by the types of properties that you offer. And a good example of this is in our local area. We are near a number of different sports complexes that have different tournaments, whether it's baseball tournaments, basketball tournaments, those kinds of things. And you realize that there's a consistent influx of families coming for these tournaments. And so going to those complexes, building some relationships and letting them know that, hey, we have a number of different properties that could easily be marketed to you guys, as well as if you have other property managers that you have connections with in your area, you really can provide a lot more value to them by saying, we have a suite of homes that could easily serve some of your teams or coaches that might be a better fit than some of the hotels that you're partnered with. That's a really good opportunity. And then taking that information, if you, of course, are using a property management system, you then can save that information and retarget these people for direct bookings, giving them a win-win where they're paying less. You're cutting out some of those OTA fees from Airbnb and VRBO, and then you guys are getting a little bit extra revenue than you typically would. So I think those are some really good ways to not only identify those local events, but then also maximize the opportunity behind them.
I like the retargeting thing. Thanks. How about you, Jane? How to keep up with all these events and how to adapt if needed?
Yeah, I mean, there's, as Brian says, we can find out local ones. You can also find them out through local online groups, local Facebook groups. Ask the questions in here. People are always willing to tell you about different events that are happening. And certainly if you've got some local events that happen every year in your area, they don't have to be huge. They can just be a small event. See if you can sponsor it. It's, as Brian said, it's like building those relationships with these other companies or events, event providers, because they're, especially smaller events, they're always looking for support in every way. It doesn't even have to be monetary. It just can be, I'll support, you can sponsor them or support them through doing a bit of promotion for them. You put their website onto your website and you link to theirs under maybe an accommodation providers, or either way, it's just different ways of building relationships, but it also puts you out there under the eyes of another audience who may not know about you. Because these events could bring people to an area that might not know that you exist, your properties exist. So it's another way of just promoting yourself as well. But I think as well, the more people that you talk to, you build those relationships with, it just grows your own community and your network around you. I think that's really, really important when you're, especially in our industry where I think your network and the people you can all help each other in terms of what you can offer to guests and also what they can offer to you as well. So I've always been quite a big one for sort of supporting and promoting those local events as best you can, and supporting each other. And especially if you are quite a small area, certainly my business in Scotland was in a very small community of people. So that's a really, really important way, certainly, of getting yourself out there and getting known and just being able to support people year on year. And that's definitely when there's really smaller events going on.
Thank you, Jane. Kyle, how does PriceLabs do it? Because obviously, I guess it's not just about the events; it's about how much demand there is for any
Yeah.
event, and that's relevant to my property. So how do we keep up with the events?
Yeah. So essentially what we're doing, we're not necessarily going through and saying like, hey, we know this is coming in. We do have a few examples of this. So if you were in the States the past couple of weeks, Brian, you probably saw this in some of your Atlanta properties. If you're in an NFL city, we knew the schedule release was going to be coming out. So we didn't block dates. We sent rates really high so that we could protect dates until that schedule was released. Then our RM team goes in and pinpoints everything and sets it up for you. But generally speaking, outside of those types of things, for an event that's just kind of brought up, we pick up on the demand signal first. So if it's going to Brian's point earlier, if it's a Taylor Swift concert and the previous year the market had been at 20% occupancy, all of a sudden we get a 10% occupancy spike, it immediately flags our team to be like, hey, we need to go see what this is that's causing this. Now, to Brian's point as well, like there are going to be local events that we may not be able to pick up on. So if we know, that this particular weekend in the summer is historically finished about 85%, and now it's looking like it's going to finish at like 90 to 95%, we may not be able to say, hey, this baseball tournament's causing this or this concert caused it. That's where I think what Brian and Jane have mentioned about being involved locally, talking to people, kind of getting your feet wet can help with that understanding of what the events are bringing in, making sure that you understand your market. Again, we keep going back to the understanding the market. This isn't as much about data as it is how the markets act. If you're in the state of Colorado, you're probably going to have an Oktoberfest regardless of which city you're in. You should be aware that that's going to happen usually in September, as weird as that is, which that's a whole nother story. But those types of things you should be aware of. And if you're new to the market or if you're entering a new market, try to talk to another property manager. Hopefully everybody's going to be buddies with you. And I did just see Bryant pop in. The Masterclass will be free next week. So there should be a link in the chat as well for you.
We share the links, indeed. And also, what I like on what you said here, in a sense, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I was in France last year. Anyway, 2 years ago, and I was showing the graph for 2024. Summer Olympics were in Paris last year, so I was showing the data was a few months before the event. I was showing that the curve, so do you think it's going up? Well, obviously it was the Summer Olympics, so they could see this because, of course, in tools like Market Dashboard, we see number of bookings. We see bookings arriving at which levels things are getting booked, which is also interesting, right? Earlier, we have to name her every time. It was Taylor Swift coming to Paris, but French people had no clue because it was a third of people buying tickets for Taylor Swift in Paris were Americans flying in because it was just cheaper to do all this than buying a ticket in the US. Anyway, just to say, it's in your market. You may not know it's happening. It's dry, but I think what I like for me is like when I look visually. Well, when visually I see like a graph and I see the events because I think it's also. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's also kind of telling us at what price this local event is booking, right? Which is also very important.
Yeah, absolutely. Understanding where the rates are actually coming in at is really important on those dates. And I think everybody in our industry's used Taylor Swift for like 2 years now. But, we've got something new, some really crazy trends like what is Oasis they've started their reunion tour and everything, and it's created insane demand in the markets that they are, and it's bringing international people into the States, taking Americans overseas as well. So yeah, I think I'm gonna start talking about Oasis now instead of T Swift, though I am a Swiftie.
Exactly, but I've started already because we talk about dynamic pricing versus price gouging and surge pricing, which is not the same thing. That's not so. Be reassured, that's not what we're doing here. So hopefully you won't get angry guests as people were as angry during when buying tickets. So going back to, I want to finish. There's a few questions. So I want to make sure we cover in 5 minutes, maybe the question of bad weather. So it's a bit strange topic, but I was talking to a lot of people who have a lot of, let's say, accommodations that depend on the weather. Outdoor, a lot of bungalows, or like smaller bungalows, or even tents. Because we also price for them. And they were telling me very interesting strategies that they have. They look at the weather report with the forecast and they see that next weekend is not going to be great. So they know they can still try to get some bookings, but they have to lower the prices because people will be saying, okay, we're going to go somewhere, but I'm going to go somewhere cheaper in the area where we're going to anyway, because we said we'd be going with the kids. So I have no clue whether it makes sense or not, but when it comes to short-term rental, holiday lets, does weather have any impact on how you can change? Imagine it's bad. It's a bad, very bad July you're having. What do you do? And bear with me. I'm going to turn to Jane in the UK because you, as you said earlier, you said it. You may have some good ideas on how to deal with that.
Yes. So I, having had sort of 10 years of running property management short-term rentals in Scotland, which is renowned for its very unstable weather, especially across the summer months. To be fair, we've never actually reduced a price because of bad weather, because what we find is you can put things to do on a rainy day into the house manual. You can provide some umbrellas there if they don't think about bringing it. You can tell them where to buy things for wet weather if they need to. But I think for a lot of guests, that the expectation when they go on holiday is, yeah, we're going to have a great time. We'll be able to go to outdoor festivals if we want, or an outdoor event, but that doesn't always happen. So I think for me, communicating with them, because I think if you live in Scotland, you're obsessed with the weather anyway. You're always watching the weather. You're always on to see what weather's like. And I know certainly from a property manager's point of view, when you see a bad week in July coming up, you can't, it's your first thing is, oh gosh, right, check the weather. Oh, we've got rain coming this week or whatever's happening. I think as well looking at your location you're at. Now, I've been in a location where our properties are only accessible by a ferry. So of course that can be affected really badly with bad weather, which means cancellations. People can't get off the island. They can't leave the properties. They can't get to the properties. And it can cause an awful lot of stress. So, for us, it's a very much a case of keeping an eye on what the ferries are doing, keeping an eye on the weather, contact your guests, let them know, because quite often they're not thinking about the weather when they're on holiday, and that's up to you to do. So I think when you've got that local knowledge, you know what's happening around about, you know what's going to affect people, keep in contact with them, give them their support, and be proactive in your messaging. If you're putting messages out there to let them know, we see this weather's coming, you're due to come and stay, bring your waterproofs, do this, give them advice what they can do so that they're not put off by it, but actually they can still come and enjoy themselves. But sometimes it's just that bit of proactive sort of messages to them. It's that communication to them and keeping them up to date. Because at the end of the day, as property managers are in our area, we're the ones that know what's happening. The guests aren't necessarily looking around them for that. And if they've never been, then they don't know. So I'm very much about trying to make that guest experience as good as possible, even though we've got bad weather that's hitting the area at the time.
Thank you, Jane. How about you, Brian?
Much of what Jane has said, I think those are some of the biggest points: communication and really just being proactive. I think most guests are really looking for someone to care in those kinds of situations. A lot of times it can feel a little cold if a guest reaches out, when some weather issue happens and the host is just kind of like, well, look at our cancellation policy. Sorry about it. So I think being able to be proactive and letting them know, hey, I'm considering you coming and I understand that there's things happening is really important. One of the messages that we send upon all booking confirmations to our guests is that, we understand that life happens and so does extenuating circumstances. We highly recommend getting travel insurance for your stay should anything arise. And so we let them know on the front end that we're trying to help cover you and that we're recommending you get this. We've partnered with some good travel insurance providers that are really affordable, and we've done that research on the front end. So a lot of times guests appreciate that and do purchase it. I think the other thing that will help is insulating your property by the way that it's designed to be almost weatherproof. And Jane touched on this a little bit, but I think with the amenities that you have, a lot of times we see, especially now with what we kind of call the amenities arms race, people are going overboard with all of the things you can do in a backyard or outside, adding pickleball courts, basketball courts, hot tubs, pools, and everything under the sun. But I think making sure that you're balancing those outdoor activities and amenities with just as much on the inside is important, because that in the event bad weather happens, that instantly is going to reduce the value of your property from a booking standpoint. If you have all of these beautiful and amazing things outside, but it's just a normal home on the inside and you don't have just as much of those kinds of amenities. So we try to make sure that we have a balance of, games, game rooms, arcade machines, and other things that people could do in the event they got stuck in bad weather inside of the home. And we've had guests specifically mention that in a review where there was bad weather and they said, they hate that they weren't able to use some of the outdoor stuff, but we're still able to enjoy their stay inside with the number of amenities. So I think those are two good things that you can do.
Thank you, Brian. Guy, I'm going to turn to you and actually try to answer two questions we have in Q&A here. Uh, First, so we have questions, about, when to start discounting, for example, and we also have from Emerson, and Yelena is talking about her far out premiums who she says are too high, setting too high prices. But first, can you again, just so we have clear on this, how does PriceLabs work, right? Because there's I think built in, for example, last minute discount, there's built in far out, they're market driven. Can you, if I don't touch anything, let's say,
Mhm.
how does that work in PriceLabs?
Yeah, so essentially what we're doing as a part of the algorithm when it comes to the last minute discount, meaning like how we're dropping prices if we're not booked, and then the far out premium where we're protecting your rates further out, we're looking at the competitors in your market and seeing what is working essentially. So what are the averages? What is it that's actually happening in the market with the data? So if you're in there, Jane, Brian, and I, we would be going and targeting long booking windows. That information would be very, very useful in there. But so many folks are getting their bookings really, really late and last minute when it comes to Airbnb. So you end up with an average of essentially what's happening in the market as a way of getting it down to where it should be. Um, Generally speaking, on the far out premium, that far out premium to me is exceptional for somebody that's a little more hands off with PriceLabs and making sure that your rates are kind of falling, but making sure you're protected as well. If you are more hands on, or if you're a little bit more of a savvy user, so to speak, that far out premium can be customized slightly. You don't want to go crazy and send it out to 2 years out, but it can be customized slightly. Um, that's not always necessary. The first thing I would say, if you see that your far out prices are too high, specifically in PriceLabs, you want to go and check your base price first and make sure there's no room for that to move. I don't know if I'm answering that exactly how you were wanting, Thibault.
Oh, that's a
But
great answer. I was just because I think it answers first how that work, which is very important, right? And then
mhm,
and that some of it's market driven, meaning like for example, it means like every day for each property, we're gonna see what a last minute discount is. For example, when does it kick in? Because obviously
mhm,
last minute in the summer could be, I don't know, 3 days, 4 days, but last minute in April for a slow market, that's going to be like, I have no clue, 2 weeks, for example. And it's going to also calculate how steep should the maximum discount be, right? And that's calculated every day again, every day again and again. So I think that's what you said is actually answering the question. So he says that they actually are in South California, and
mhm.
for them it's Brendan. Brendan
Yep.
says that in California it's actually low season, so hard to adapt. It's also kind of was going here like if you still keep market driven here, for example, for this last minute discount, well, they're
Mhm.
going to calculate what's, as you said, what's happening in your market and what's working overall, and will adapt to this. So hopefully the
Yep.
market-driven aspects of the tool should already be in some work, but obviously you have to keep an eye open if you're a bit more savvy, or if you want to, you can of course tweak things, right? Is it a good way to say that, Kyle?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is. Real quick, Thibault, I just wanted to hit on the weather thing from the side of, okay, we've identified that we've got some bad weather. How can we potentially get some more guests to come in when we've identified that? The one thing I would say is you being aware of the market and making adjustments is always going to be beneficial to you. If you look right now and you see that weather is looking really, really bad a week out, you can go into PriceLabs, do a date specific override, and just say, take 10 to 15% off of these dates. That one really quick move is going to really prop you up on Airbnb, on Verbo, on booking.com. Those algorithms will start to favor you a little bit more because they see, hey, this person's working with us to make us a little bit more money. So just by going in and making a quick little tweak when you see this, you could potentially still bring people in. And then once you start getting those booking requests or the bookings coming in, then I say take Brian and Jane's advice and say, this is what's happening. And hopefully, everything's good. There's travel insurance if you need it.
And once again, Kyle, you had advice on the booking pickup data, and people like
Yes.
Kate is asking, where can I see it?
Yeah.
Can you just like walk us to where I can see this in a product?
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want me to share my screen real quick? I've got PriceLabs pulled up. If not, no worries.
Just do 1 minute and then go back to
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So give me 1 second. We'll get that on there for you and we'll be right back out of it. All right. So in here, when you get in PriceLabs, you pick your listing,
I don't
go
see
to
it
review.
yet. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, awesome. All right. So you'll go to review prices. Then right over here, you've got a couple of extra options. Like to go to neighborhood data. Let this load up real quick for us. And I say real quick, and of course it's going slow because of some reason. All right, so here we go. There's a lot of noise right now because I have some extra things added to mine. But key things for you to look at right here. Pickup is going to be these little lines right here. So you've got an extra button here. If you hit add pickup right there, you'll notice you get two additional lines. The red one is where the market pickup is for this year, meaning over the past 7 days, where have we booked at? So if I hover right here, that 7 day market pickup is almost 10% for that day I can see. That gray choppy line that you see is where it was at last year. So kind of the easiest way I think I can say it. But this will be really beneficial for you. So if I look here and I just look at this 7 day one, so we're going to look at that red line. Majority of my bookings are coming right here. So we're looking at less than a month out. But then I can come over here and I can see there's still plenty of activity in September. There's still activity in October. There's even some activity over here randomly on March 21st. So if you wanted to, by looking at this, you could go into your March 21st, say, hey, I want to adjust my rates and potentially try to grab something from those people that are looking in that area.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
So let's we're at time, so let's close it. And it's still there were more than 100 people, by the way, live. And
Awesome. Thank you
so
all.
just somebody would be happy for that. There's still 97 of you. Thank you so much. I want to quickly go back to Jane and Brian to, of course, thank you. And any last word on and how can anyone contact you if they want to know more about what you do or get some advice from you? Jane, want to get started?
Yeah, I think just if you want to speak to about anything, then I'm happy for you to reach out on LinkedIn. I'm just Jane Mack, and you'll find me on LinkedIn. Or you could email me, jane@yourairhost.co.uk. I'll be happy to help with anything.
Thank you, Jane. Brian.
Yes, you guys can also connect with me on LinkedIn, Brian Hatcher, Instagram as well at Hatch Capital. And yeah, you can also visit the website Hatch Capital if you're interested in working together or learning more about pricing or any consulting services.
Cool. Thank you, Brian. Kyle.
Go to pricelabs.co. You can find me anytime. You can grab me at LinkedIn. You'll also see me at conferences. I'm always happy to chat revenue management, whether you're a price labber or using somebody else or doing it manually. I'm always happy to chat. And I hope to see lots of y'all next week during our masterclass. We start it on Tuesday, post Memorial Day.
Fantastic. And thank you all again. Once again, Jane, Brian, Kyle, thank you so much for your time. We prepped this, so thank you for the prep time. Thank you for being here today, the answers. Thank you all for your questions. So you get the recording. I want to thank Snida, Sora, Bjuvika, obviously, who helped behind the scenes for this event. Very important. I won't be in the US until September, so you don't see me. You'll see Kyle, though, probably. All right, you take care, everyone, and I see you next for Price Labs or Rentals Club's next webinar. You take care. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.